lingerie pattern to share with you this week. It is a Delores of St Paul, and it's quite tatty. This is the pattern envelope, and you can see the whole thing that tells us like pattern number, etc. The name of it is missing up here. This is all that I've got as far as the envelope goes, but I have the entire pattern and instructions are in perfectly good condition. So we're going to sew up this little slip. It's actually a pair of shorts, but the front, because of how it's sewn, it makes it look like a regular slip in the front. It's very cute. Think of a skirt style slip. I'm going to be using tricot knit. I have a whole bunch of this blue. You can see I've sewn on it already. I've got scraps of it. I'm going to use that. I have its matching lace, and then I have a picot edge elastic. And other than that, we need thread and scissors, and I'm going to trace off my pattern right now. I'm not going to cut into this vintage pattern. I'm going to trace it. And one of the nice things about that, this is a size 9, and I don't wear a size 9, so I can actually, when I trace this off, I'm going to size it up for myself. So I will have this will fit me, even though the pattern I'm starting with doesn't. I'm not going to show all of the sizing up in this video, but I am working on a pants alteration video. It has a lot of different things. There's probably going to be more than one, actually, probably a couple of videos. So that will be coming. Not going to tackle that this week. This week we're just going to sew up this pretty vintage pattern. Let's trace and cut. I'll be back in a minute after this is traced off and sized up. So here is one of my fronts. You can see how this is cut out right here. And what we're going to do, this is the right side of my fabric, so we're going to fold this back on itself like this, so this all lines up. And I'm going to sew this little tiny line straight down. Now if you have a regular shorts pattern that doesn't have this little hook out, all you're going to do is fold back on itself just like this, wrong sides together, and just edge stitch a little tiny bit below this crotch line right here. Super simple. So I'm going to sew this on both fronts, this little tiny piece down at the sewing machine. This is not serged. I'm trying to decide if I'm going to serge this together or not, but for the beginning it's all going to be done on the sewing machine. All right, here we are. We're just going to do this little edge stitch. I'm just straight stitching at the sewing machine. Now that we have our little pleats sewn in here, we're going to sew part of our center front seam. Now the directions have you cut your lace pieces and do some things, but they don't really say when to sew this center front here to the notch, and this is the time to do it. It's only a 1/4 inch seam, so I'm going to go ahead and sew that in. If you are sewing a woven, you would want to straight stitch this and then maybe zigzag or finish the seam edge in some way. Because I'm sewing with a knit that won't fray, I'm just going to go ahead and just stitch this in with a really tiny little zigzag because I just want it to have enough give. The thing with shorts or pants is they have a lot of stress on the seams. 1/4 inch seam allowance to the notch, which is a little hard to see because of how I have it pinned, but the notch is right there. That's where this pin is. I left it there. So I'm just going to sew this one seam in. And if you look at figure 1, you can see that this is sewn in already before they start applying the lace. It's a little confusing. It just is. I think that they don't do a superb job of explaining the directions. I know I have a Bernina pattern. Here's the Bernina pattern that's very similar, at least when you first look at it. We compare them side by side. But let me show you the difference in the pleat. The Bernina pattern has a very deep pleat, and it has it in the front and in the back. So there it is. Now this one, this is the back of the pattern. It's kind of hard to tell, but this is your back. And this is your front, and the back has the directions on it. These old Bernina patterns were really nice, and it explains a little bit better about, I think, just a little bit on how it's going to be sewn, and it does a good job of showing the way the lace goes on, which I think this one does too. But we are going to go ahead and sew this. See where it says clip, and it has a little notch right there, and it's way before your crotch line. That's the same this one. So we're going to sew this little short seam just to there. Now the difference is on both of these, this one has this cut apart here, which I don't think it needed to be, but they did. On this one, they don't have that. You don't have a hole in your fabric, which I personally think this is not the greatest, but it is what it is. So we're going to sew this together, and then we'll be ready to start looking at applying our lace. So here's our tiny little seam zigzagged together. So that's what we've got so far. Now this is what I'm not crazy about. I don't know why there's a hole. I don't really like that at all. Can't do anything about it. I just don't like it. But anyway, that's just how it is. So this is the point where we start doing our lace. And it has us take our lace. There's a lot of ways you can do this. This is the way they show, where you measure and cut your lace. Or you can do it the way this Bernina pattern does, where they are kind of using one piece of lace to measure it all out, and they're mitering their corners, top and bottom, and here to go across the leg too. So you have options on how you want to do this. I like this, and I like the mitered corner. I think that's very attractive. This one, instead of mitering the corner, they just cross it with the other. So you could choose to do either. I'm going to take my little piece of lace here. I'm going to just lay this out like this, so you can kind of see how this is. Now, when we go to do our lace, here's our pretty lace, like this. We want to make sure this is folded back right now, but if I sew this like that, it's going to sew half of that part of that crotch behind. So when we get ready to sew, we want to make sure we open that back up when we're stitching this side, so that we don't pin down or stitch back this crotch underneath. We want to keep it free, so we're only stitching this outer edge. But you want to make this pretty at the top, so you can come up here to the top. So here's this, and we can fold out and trim, and then just zigzag that on so that we have a nice point, and then do the same thing on the other side. And then we will zigzag down this edge, and then this edge we will top stitch down. And I'm really struggling with this because they don't really address it. Do you hear the frustration in my voice? All right, why do we have a hole? Okay, I'm just gonna call it out right now. I do not like the way this is done. I'm gonna go ahead and sew it up according to their directions. I don't like it. If you choose to do this, I would not cut that out. You really do not need to cut out that hole. I think that it's better if it were actually in there. And you had excess fabric. I think that it would be much better to have that than to not have it. Personal opinion. I'm gonna go ahead and do my lace the way they're doing it too, because I just think it makes it easier to follow their directions for this example. So we're gonna take our two pieces. They need to be long enough to come all the way to the bottom. So we need two pieces that long, however long that is, according to what you're working with. This pattern can be cut in two lengths. I cut the longer length. The first thing they do is they lay this on here with our straight edge of our lace, and they're just stitching this up. They're attaching the inside piece first, up to here. So we're going to go ahead and do that. So I'm going to start down here at the bottom, or you can start at the top. We're going to just tack this down, straight stitch it down. I do not know why you need to sew this pleat in if you're going to turn around and do this anyway. We're going to go ahead and do that on both pieces. So then we'll have just a little piece sewn down, and then we can come back and fix this decorative part at the top. I'm going to go ahead and cut my other piece of lace, and I'm going to line up my pattern so that when I'm working at the top, I can match my design. All right, off to the sewing machine. So here's side one. This is open, and this is where it started stitching. You can just see how I followed down. Here's the pleat. I really do not like how this is done. I'm just going to be honest. So this will open up like this for sewing together. I really hate this. I'm super unhappy with it. I just don't like it. I think this should be a complete piece of fabric. I'm not happy at all. Okay, I'm gonna quit whining about it and continue. I'm gonna go ahead and do the other side the same way, and then we can sew this crotch line up. Well, actually, we gotta finish the top of this and then crotch line. We've sewn, so this is what I've sewn so far, just this inner edge. None of this is attached yet. I'm gonna open this up so you can see this is our crotch line here. So now we have things we can do. We can sew our crotch line together. Let's flip this to the inside so you can see. We've got a notch, so we can match up our notch. We can sew that up if we want to. Now, I personally wouldn't. I always sew my right leg to left leg and then sew the rest of the crotch, so that's what we're going to do here. So I'm going to wait to sew this, but what we will do is go ahead and finish off this lace. So we can come and do this outer edge. Make sure you open up the leg before you do it so you don't pin this down, because we need this free. So we can sew around this outer edge, and we can shape the top up here. Now I kind of lined up my motif so that they would match. So I'm going to fold back one side like this. Okay, and we're going to stitch across like that, and then I'm going to trim out and then stitch down, and then I'll match the other side the same. Now you can, if you don't want to see this under here, you can cut this off and have a very small amount. I don't care if that shows underneath or not, like that. So it'll be on both sides. There'll be a little shadowing of the lace underneath. They kind of show how that's flipped so that it would be behind there. That happens when you miter. But anyway, this is done with a very tiny zigzag. I don't know if you can even see how small that little zigzag is that I've done. But we're going to do that same thing all the way around and finish this off. After that, it's pretty easy to start putting the pants together. So that's how it's looking, and I have this left over, so I'm going to trim this out, this extra piece of lace right here. And I can actually pull this forward so I can trim from the inside and get rid of that excess if I want to, or I could cut it flat and it would show a little bit from underneath, but I'm going to just trim it so I have a little short seam allowance on the inside. Let me show you what that looks like. So that's how it looks. Now we're ready to do the other side the same way. Pull out the little crotch out of the way. Get rid of this thread. Boop. All right, and now I did from the bottom up on that one, but from this one I'm going to do from the top down. So we're going to line up and fold this so that they match. Now you could definitely pin all of this ahead of time. Whatever is easiest for you to get the look that you want. Just want to make sure I got it lined up the same. So now that I've done that, I'm going to trim off this excess really quickly. And then I'm going to sew down the front. There we are. So you can see my little point. And now I'm going to sew down this little section. I'm going to have one overlap the others just slightly. And away we go. And if you need to, you can even increase your zigzag just a tiny bit. From the outside, it looks like that. Again, I am hating this a lot. And from the inside, it looks like that. And I just, because they cut it apart, because there's a hole there, it's very hard to get that to come together and look nice. Here's our crotch line. which we're going to worry about later. So now we're going to actually put the shorts together. We're going to grab our back and we're going to sew side seam and inseam, right leg and left leg together. Right sides together. And we are going to line up our side seams. And you can see they've got notches, and we're just going to sew that down 1/4 inch. And then we're going to come to the inseam and do the same thing for both legs. Then we'll come back and do our crotch. And because I've done this, I can go ahead and put the lace around the bottom too if I want to. All right, I'm gonna hold these up so you can kind of see where we're at. Look at our weird shorts. We've got a pant leg here and a pant leg here. So now we're ready to sew together the crotch line. So I'm just turning this so that it'll meet. So here's my inside leg and inside leg. So we're gonna match those up. And you can see now this crotch line also lines up. And we're going to just sew this up and all the way around. So let me put a few pins so you can see. Here's the back. Now I've done all of this on the sewing machine. You 100% could do this on the overlock if you want to. I always do sew it on the overlock, so this time I thought I would show how easy it is to do this on a sewing machine if you don't have an overlock machine, a serger. Matching up our seams, and we're matching up our notches. Make sure to give a haircut wherever our seams are going to cross, and that'll just keep from your machine accidentally eating those threads and giving you problems. And then I'm going to pinch this together. This is the odd part. This is where all of this is happening. So we're going to see how close I can get to get that stitched. It's going to get pretty tight up there. I normally don't cut the notches out. I normally just do a little slice, but because I only have 1/4 inch seam allowance and this is stretchy, I didn't want to have any splitting of my fabric, so I cut the notches outward this time instead of doing a little clip in. All right, we're ready now to sew this seam. Get it to lay nice. And it should be one pant leg inside the other. There we go. So you can see there's our crotch line. Just want you to see this close up. This is my pleat. This is the inside where the lace is, and this is the inside of the crotch where it comes up, and it actually disappears into the pleat because they had us trim away that fabric. So I'm going to sew as close as I can up into here, and then it's going to kind of merge. So I'm going to lose a little bit of my 1/4 inch seam allowance as I go. Let's see if I can do this one-handed. Go ahead and get rid of my pin. You can see, there's my 2 layers. This is how I fudged it, so it's not perfect right there. Let's look at it from the right side. All right, so I just sewed that crotch seam. Here it is. And this is the little funky part up here where it was trimmed away and we have the pleat and all that happening. So let's just flip it around and see if what I did works. It does. It made it disappear. I did have to fudge it a little bit. Now here's the pleat. And you can see I have that little thing, which I really don't like, so I'm going to come back and fix that. That just looks terrible. And it's on both sides, so I need to fix that. I don't like how that has a little bit of a, it just sticks out. You can see it. Here's the front. But that's how the front looks. Isn't that pretty? Here's the back. Could use a good pressing. So now I'm going to do my leg lace. So to do that, and these are nice wide legs because it's a large to begin with, and it's a large size. So this lace is, I'm going to, here's my inseam. I'm just going to lay my lace on the inseam. I'm going to let this scallop hang just off the edge of the fabric. Now I could bring it all the way down like this. So you could do it either way. So I could have it all the way down at the bottom like that, or up at the top. So I'm going to do it this way. You know what? I have an issue. I'm going to look and see how they did it, because that pleat, I can't cross the pleat that way. Oh, but they did. Oh. Okay. So here's our pleat. Boy, I don't know. Okay. They did. Well, we will do it too. We will too. So I'm going to start here. Do I want it to hang off like that? Or do I want it to be across like this? I think I'm going to let it hang off. We're going to start right here. And what's going to happen is when I come back around, I will cross over my lace. I'll show you when I come around the other side. So I'm going to leave it like this. So it's got about 1/4 of an inch. And then here's my excess, so I'm just going to trim that right off. Close to where I stitched. And that's how that finishes. So I have one leg done. Hold it up so you can see. So here's the leg that I've completed. And now I'm going to go ahead and do this leg, and then I think I'm going to come back where these are, and I'm going to do a little zigzagging to take care of that little hooky-doo. I just really do not like it. It makes me unhappy. So I'm going to work on that too to make it look less noticeable. And then we'll put in our waistband. All right, we are now at waistband. I have all the legs done and I've measured out my elastic. Here's my center back. Now I'm using a picot edged elastic that's felt backed. So what I've done is I've made, this is the right side of my shorts, and I've laid this side of the elastic against it so that the felt side will be against the skin when it flips over like this. Okay, so you can serge this on or you can sew it on. I'm just gonna do a quick zigzag. I've overlapped in the center back, and then I've quartered it. So here's the side seam, here's the front, and just so you can see, here's how much give I have. So you can see how much it'll stretch to gather up. So now I'm just going to zigzag around this elastic, and once it's zigzagged the first time, I will flip this to the inside and zigzag it again. Now you can instead make a casing and draw your elastic through. That's another way of doing it. And there's a third way, which is to have this elastic on the inside, but no matter what, and stitch it and flip it over. But you want to make sure that however you do it, if you're doing a picot edge, that the little edge of picot is going to show when you flip it over like this. I'm going to start at the center back. And before I was using a very small zigzag. Now I've gone to a much wider zigzag and more separated, because I don't want to overstretch this elastic, because I'm going to actually zigzag 2 times. So this is the first zigzag to attach it, and the second zigzag will be the decorative one that will show for the outside of the garment. Okay, so I've got my elastic sewn, and now I'm going to flip it down. I'm going to stitch it one more time. You can see how the little picot sticks up, and I'm going to go around and stitch it one more time. This time I'm doing the triple zigzag is what I call it, and it's where the zigzag has actually straight stitches in each leg, and it gives a nice even finish if it's going to be one that's going to be on top where it can be seen. So I'm going to flip this over, and I want to make sure that my edge of my fabric comes up right close to the picot but doesn't cover it. Again, starting in the center back, because we're going to have our stitches will kind of cross over each other where I start and stop. So here's how the triple zigzag looks with the little picot edge. They're done. I'm going to just roll back a little bit so you can see a little slip. Isn't that pretty? I'm going to take some finished pictures of it for you, but it turned out really pretty. I do not like how they chose to do the front. I just don't. I think I'm going to revisit this and try the Bernina pattern that I have. That's the same thing. The original one I did, I'm trying to remember what it was. It might have been a quick sell or something. I've made this, I used to, when I was a young woman, even before I had kids, I wore slips like this all the time to work in. I love them because they were easy to wear. You threw them on like shorts. They still look pretty like a slip. The thing with a slip that's shorts, it's called a Petti slip. It doesn't ride up. So, this generation may not know, but back in the day when we wore slips, sometimes they would kind of stick to your skirt, or you would ride up and your slip would end up around your waist instead of where you wanted it. And that can't happen when it's shorts. It just can't. Like, it might pull up a little bit, but it won't completely ride up. So as far as a slip that you're going to wear that's functional, these are great. These also can make pretty little sleep shorts too, make a little matching top, which is probably how I'll wear it. Though I still do wear a slip once in a while. So let me take a few finishing shots of these pretty little shorts. They are very pretty. I just don't really like the way they did the front little pleat and the treatment. Not my personal favorite. I usually really enjoy a Delores of St. Paul. Started to say the wrong thing. Delores of St. Paul. I like their patterns. I have quite a few of those vintage patterns and I do like them. But don't necessarily love the way this one was sewn up. If you want to see some of their vintage lingerie, I have quite a few, including a very pretty peignoir set and some other things. So you check the lingerie playlist and you'll see some other vintage type sewing. All right, let me show you some final shots and I will see you next week for another fun.